Just a little bit more about lipids. This is specifically about dietary cholesterols, including, for instance, when your physician tells you that you have high cholesterol. What does that mean? What do you actually look for? What do you actually want it to be? And then I'll also talk a little bit about the ketogenic diet physiology and what it has to do with this story, because it makes it a little more interesting. Okay, so the dietary cholesterols, the LDLs, there's LDL and VLDL. Those stand for low density lipids and very low density lipoprotein. Those typically are called the bad cholesterols for reasons I'll explain in just a second. And then the HDL, high density lipoprotein. High density lipoprotein is really the good cholesterol. And really, when somebody gives you your cholesterol measurement, it doesn't do you any good unless you have two numbers or you have a ratio that represents the relationship between the two numbers. So what you really, really want to know is the ratio between the bad cholesterols and the good cholesterols. So why do you want to know? These bad cholesterols, the LDLs, both of them, tend to gunk up the walls of your arteries and therefore adding to your blood pressure by narrowing the tubes. They also make the tubes less elastic, which has its own set of implications and why it's called hardening of the arteries. But the good cholesterols, the HDL cholesterols, actually tend to clean out your blood vessels. So what you want is a nice ratio between the two of them. So where do you get most of your LDLs? You get them primarily from saturated fats, not exclusively animal fats, but that's a really good way to get them from animal fats. And your HDL cholesterols you can get from unsaturated fats, but another really, really great way to increase your HDL cholesterol is exercise. Cardiovascular exercise increases your HDL. Okay, so what are you looking for? So the ratio that you're looking for of total cholesterol to HDL cholesterol, so the whole number compared to your level of HDL. The American Heart Association recommends a ratio below 5. Ideal is 3.5, but lower is even better. So an example would be a total cholesterol of 180 milligrams per deciliter. If your HDL is 82 and you got 180, that gives you a ratio, an awesome ratio of about 2.2. Typically speaking, dietary cholesterols, most people who are vegetarian, especially if they're vegan, unless they have genetically high cholesterol, they're not going to have high cholesterol, because in this country, a lot of our high cholesterol predispositions come from the way that we eat animal products. And you don't have to eat meat. Eggs, milk products, dairy, those kinds of things do it as well. Okay, so the other clinical connection that I kind of wanted to talk about is that even though this isn't in your textbook, I thought it might bring the subject around to be a little bit more interesting, is the whole ketogenic diet, which has been a big, big popular diet over probably the last 5 to 8 years, maybe even longer. I want to talk about what it has to do with this, and I'm not going to tell you whether it's good for you or not, but I'm going to tell you enough physiology that you can start to ask some questions. So one of the things that happens during starvation or really long-term fasting or really, really low carbohydrate diets is that your body can try to switch the brain specifically, other organs too, to no longer depend so much on burning glucose. And it can try to switch the brain to burning something called ketones, okay? So ketone, that's not the same as keto acids. Ketone acids are not the same as keto acids. So what happens is if you're taking in, let's look at this picture. This is similar, only just to show you how it's related to the one that we've been looking at. This is really concentrating on this part. It's taken out all of the glucose and we're just concentrating on what happens with the breakdown products of triglycerides. So here's what happens. Let's say you are low carb either on purpose or starvation reasons. What you could do is switch over to gluconeogenesis, but remember gluconeogenesis will start to break down your proteins. So is there anything you could do to switch your brain over to burning fats instead of burning proteins when you're out of glucose? And the answer is yes. So what you can do is you can take excessive fatty acids when you have a lot of them and no sugar, and you can actually take them and make them into ketones. And then importantly, your ketones will get this, by the way, the process of ketogenesis, which is converting fatty acids to ketones, occurs in your liver. So the liver is just all up in metabolism business. So once you get the ketone converted to ketones, you can dump them into the bloodstream, and the brain can use ketones for energy. It will be mad at you when you try to make it switch over to ketones, but you can get the brain to burn ketones for energy. It can be used as a partial alternative to glucose. Now, this diet, the ketogenic diet, was actually developed for childhood seizure disorders, and it's really, really hard to stick to because your brain really prefers to burn glucose. But in order to stay in ketogenesis, usually, and the numbers vary just a little bit from place to place, usually your diet needs to consist of about 75% fat, about 20% protein, and about 5% carbohydrates, which is really hard to stick to. We've tried the ketogenic diet at my house, and it's really hard to stay on there. So the body will shift most of your catabolic processes to burning fats. And if you have a cell that still needs glucose, you can do some gluconeogenesis, but this is better than burning up all of your proteins, like your skeletal muscle protein. So is this diet healthy? It really depends on your own personal metabolism and physiology. If you've got a predisposition to high cholesterol and you want to try this diet, then it's going to be really difficult unless you are committed to only eating plant sources for all of that fat, which is pretty hard to do. It's hard to get that much fat with plant sources. It's not impossible. People do it. It is good for type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes we'll talk about in more detail later. It's like when you have chronically high levels of sugar that cause insulin suppression problems. And it is still, for reasons that are not completely understood, it is still good for childhood seizure disorders, but you have to be very, very rigid with yourself on the diet. The other thing is that all of these ketones are also acidic, and so it can be really hard on your kidneys if you're not paying attention to your kidney function, and it can alter the body's pH and cause ketoacidosis. So it's not a diet to be undertaken without some medical supervision, especially if you have any liver or kidney problems or cholesterol problems. So it's not something to be undertaken lightly.